Hello, this is Carlos Salvar from the Bexar County Republican Party of Bexar County. And with us today we have Kevin Yeary that is going to tell us something really interesting about this court, the Courts of Criminal Appeals, where he is a judge right now and looking for your vote. Kevin, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Carlos.
And tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll go on a little bit about the Court of Appeals, Criminal Appeals, and more in detail. But first, everybody here wants to know more about you and your personal life, and how did you decide to become a judge? And
thanks.
How did it came about?
Well, you know, I'm Texas born and bred. I was born in Cotulla, Texas, and raised in Laredo, Texas. I went to college and law school at St. Mary's University here in San Antonio. It was there that I met my wife, but we did not get married till later on. We didn't even date in college. But I went to St. Mary's Law School, like I said, and afterwards I was very fortunate to get offered a job working as a law clerk for a judge who served on the Court of Criminal Appeals at that time. And so I was able to help him for 1 year to draft opinions and research the law and try to figure out how to decide the important cases that get decided at the Court of Criminal Appeals.
Do you have people doing that for you now?
I do, yes.
Very good.
Yes, I do, and they're fantastic. And actually one of them was a senior lawyer to me when I was a young lawyer at the court, and he works for me now as one of my senior lawyers. So I've been very
fortunate.
blessing. Yeah, it is. And great relationships and friendships that have developed over the time of my career have been something that have been another great blessing for me. But I left the court and I went into private practice with a firm here in San Antonio. And in that firm I did civil litigation and criminal defense work. And so I did that for about 3 years. And after 3 years in that firm, I realized that, you know, I really missed the kind of work that I had been doing at the Court of Criminal Appeals. So I searched for a way to do criminal appellate work again. And again, fortune was with me. Divine providence, I like to believe, was guiding my path, and I was offered a job working in the Dallas District Attorney's Office in their appellate section, which is a section of lawyers that works exclusively on appeals, which is different than, you know, trials where you have juries and so forth. In an appeal, you only have judges who you are addressing, and the judges are going to write an opinion deciding your case. So appellate work is different. So I was able to do that full-time in Dallas. At the same time, I was dating that girl now, who ultimately became my wife, Susie, and she was living in Houston. But when she agreed to marry me, because she was in training to become a pediatrician, I needed to move to Houston to be with her. She couldn't come to be with me. So I reached out to the Harris County, the DA's office in Houston, and asked them for a job, and they hired me, again, to work in their appellate section. So again, my criminal appellate lawyer career continued. And Susie and I lived together. We had our first child together there in Houston while I was in the DA's office, and she was training to be a pediatrician. And when she finished her training, we sort of laid out the pros and cons of where we wanted to live as a family now that we were both done with all of our educations. And San Antonio was the place that we decided to live because we had her parents that lived here, and I had 3 sisters that lived here with children that we could raise our children around with their cousins. So we moved to San Antonio. My wife got a job here, and I was then employed in the Bexar County DA's office, again doing criminal appellate work, which I continued until 2014. And you asked, you know, until I became a judge. Well, in 2014, 3 of the 9 judges on the Court of Criminal Appeals announced that they were not going to run for re-election. And so there were 3 what we call open seats on the court. And having been somebody who practiced criminal appellate law in Texas for quite a long time at that point, I decided to toss a coin and put my name in the hat and see whether the people of Texas would choose me to serve them on the court. At the time, I remember saying, Carlos, I don't know if I'm called to be a judge on the Court of Criminal Appeals, but I knew that I felt like I was called to run for the position. And so I did. I ran for the position.
And you won.
And I won. So, you know, and I really do. I feel like my life is filled with instances of God sort of guiding the path and leading me to where I am today. So again, I feel really fortunate to be able to serve the public, the people of Texas, as a judge on the Court of Criminal Appeals.
And so why is the criminal appeals so different from any other state in Texas?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good question. You know, Texas is one of only 2 states in the entire country that have 2 Supreme Courts. We have one Supreme Court called the Supreme Court of Texas. And a lot of people think, well, that's it. That's the only Supreme Court of Texas. But it's really not. They're the Supreme Court for all cases, all litigation that is civil cases. So they decide cases like divorces, contract disputes, personal injury matters. All of those things are civil cases. But they do not get to decide criminal cases. We have another Supreme Court for that called the Court of Criminal Appeals, the court that I serve on, and our court is the Supreme Court for all criminal cases in Texas. And if somebody, say they lose in our court, there's only one place where they can go to get our decision overturned, and that's the United States
Supreme Court.
That's right.
All right, so we have one more question,
Okay.
and I'm sure everybody is very interested to know about your philosophy of how you relate to your work, and also a question that I believe is important for all of judges is how do virtue affect your life?
Right. Carlos, that's a great question, and it's an intricate one. So let's start with the virtues. I think that to be a public servant of any kind, you have to have certain virtues, and they're not uniform. Like I said, I'll tell you, I'm my own greatest critic, right? And I know that I am a person who's flawed and I make mistakes, but I strive to be an honest person all the time and to be somebody who's humble. And I think those qualities are great qualities for a judge because they allow you the opportunity to see when you are not seeing things the right way, and to alter your conduct and alter your judgments and alter the way that you think to the right way of thinking. So I think virtues are important for that reason. But you also mentioned philosophy, and and I have what I think is an ongoing, very refined judicial philosophy that I think stands out. And so I wanted to have the opportunity to talk about it. You know, I just think that we have a very unique country and a very unique state. And in both of the country and the state, we have separated powers. And everybody understands, they hear, well, we have the separation of powers in America. But how do you bring that into practice when you occupy a seat of power in one of those distinct branches of government with distinct powers? And, we have in this country and in this state, we have an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch. The legislative branch is the branch of government who is supposed to write the law. The executive branch is the branch of government that is supposed to enforce the law, and the judicial branch is there simply to resolve disputes between parties whenever they have a disagreement about something that might cause civil liability or criminal liability. I believe that the judicial branch is not supposed to write the law. We're not supposed to be policymakers. We're supposed to defer to the other branches of government, which is where policy gets made, the legislative branch and the executive branch. And I feel strongly that if we don't do that as judges, if we don't exercise that judicial restraint to hold back from being policymakers, to hold back from being lawmakers, then we blur the lines of the separation of powers, and we become the legislators, or we become the executives in a particular.
And how do you reverse legislating from the bench?
How do you keep from doing that?
How do you reverse?
How do you reverse it? Well, I think maybe
that's a tough
one of the places might be, honestly, I went to law school, and I know a lot of people in the country have been to law school, a lot of lawyers in the country, and I think my recollection of being in law school is that the professors there tend to teach us as lawyers that opinions that are written by the courts are the law. And I think that's where the mistake gets made. Opinions written by courts are entitled to respect and to deference. But what they really are is an explanation of why judges enter the judgment that they entered. That judgment is the thing that is enforceable in our law, not the opinions that the judges write. So we should respect those opinions that the judges write, explaining why they enter judgments. We should defer to them, particularly when we're talking about other courts, and especially lower courts should defer to the decisions of the higher courts that have been made interpreting the law. But we should always recognize those opinions are not the law. What is written by the legislature, that is the law.
And one more question before we go.
Yeah.
We want to ask you, how many judges in your court, and also how long is your term?
Oh, great. Well, I think I mentioned previously that we have 9 judges on the Court of Criminal Appeals. We're very similar to the U.S. Supreme Court. They've got 9 justices. We're very similar to the Texas Supreme Court. They've got 9 justices. And all 3 of our courts all decide cases all together. So that just differentiates us from the intermediate courts of appeals, where even though you might have, see on the San Antonio Court of Appeals here, I think they've got 7 justices. But they decide cases in panels of 3, and so they rotate, serving in panels of 3 to decide cases. When you come to a court like our court, the Court of Criminal Appeals, or you come to a court like the Texas Supreme Court or the United States Supreme Court, there are 9 judges that always work together, all 9 voting on all the cases. It's a little bit more difficult, when you've got 9 tremendous egos in a room that all believe that we think we know the right answer, and we have to work out between us how we're going to come to a way to resolve a case and write an opinion that will help to guide lawyers and judges in the future. It's complicated. But so we've got 9 judges on the court, and the last part of that question is, what is our term? We have 6-year terms. So we're sort of like United States senators, right? They get 6-year terms. And so the year that I was elected, Senator John Cornyn from Texas was reelected. So it's not a surprise then with a 6-year term that he's running for office this year, and so am I, because we both have 6-year terms. But what that means for the court is that with 9 judges, every 2 years, 3 of us have to run for reelection again. And so there are 3 judges up for re-election on the Court of Criminal Appeals this year. I happen to be one of them. Mm-hmm. And so one of the reasons why I'm sitting here with you today is that I'm up for re-election. And
you want people to vote for you.
I do. I'm asking for your vote. I love the law, and I love the work that I do in the law. And I feel like I'm really well prepared for it, and that I've been doing a good job for you over the last 5.5 years or so. And so I'm asking you to send me back so that I can serve you again for 6 more years on the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals.
Well, thank you very much. And we want to ask you, is there anything else, anybody you want to thank for your success?
I'll tell you what, the first person to thank anytime about anything in my life is God. God has been there for me as a child. My parents instilled the importance of my faith into me. I'm a Roman Catholic, and it's been a tremendous part of my life, my entire life. I also want to have to thank my wife, because nobody can be a public servant unless their wife or their spouse are behind them 100%, because it's a huge sacrifice, not just on my part, but on the part of my family, which means that there are times when I can't be there because I need to be here with you visiting about things like we're talking about today.
Reason, thank you very much for running and for being our judge.
Thank you.
In the Court of Criminal Appeals in Austin, Texas.
Thanks
even though you live in San Antonio. We thank you very much. We want you to like, subscribe, and make sure you go to the links that I'm going to be putting underneath. Yes, tell us.
Don't forget to visit judgeyeary.com. I've got a website. You can find out all about me there.
And it'll be on the list below.
Yes,
right.
And I have a Facebook website too, and I want to thank everybody for this great opportunity to have served you over these last 5.5 years.
Thank you very much again, and we'll see you soon, all right?
Okay, great.